Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. I hope you're enjoying your day as you're listening to this podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I want to say welcome to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. And if you are a returning listener, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back. And in this Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast, I interview full-time yoga teachers from across the world to see and learn from their journey of how they became a full-time yoga teacher and what are some things they learned along the way. Every yoga teachers I get to interview have their own unique journey, but also there's some common threads amongst all yoga teachers that I get to interview. So this is a podcast where we get to explore the differences and unique path that yoga teachers take to make this into a full-time career, as well as commonality and common threads and common challenges we may go through as a full-time yoga teacher. I hope this podcast interviews can become an inspiration for you to do what you love. And by no means I'm trying to promote being a full-time yoga teacher is the best and all yoga teacher must be a full-time yoga teacher. I think it's not an easy path and it's not a path for everyone, and that is completely okay. But I think we can all learn and get inspired from stories. I do have one announcement. There's an upcoming workshop this weekend, this Saturday, which is November 8th. And it's a workshop on hypermobility. The guest teacher is AJ, who is a physical therapist, full-time physical therapist here in Long Beach, California. And they used to be a full-time yoga teacher in New York City. And they are teaching a workshop series called Yoga Meets Physical Therapy, where AJ is going to help us bridge the gap between the knowledge and tools that PT have and the knowledge and tools that yoga teachers have. I think we can learn so much as a yoga teacher. We can learn so much from the world of physical therapy. And we have amazing tools in yoga that we can also use working with our students. I think it's important to create a space where we are learning from one another. AJ is the best person to be teaching this workshop because AJ knows what it's like to be a full-time yoga teacher and a full-time physical therapist. Topic is on hypermobility. And if you've been teaching for a while, you know that many students who come to yoga are quite bendy. They have very flexible body. And a lot of yoga teachers are bendy and have flexible bodies. It kind of self-select itself. And although I don't really have a bendy body, I have noticed many of my students and many of my colleagues do. And hypermobility is an interesting topic to explore. It's more than just having a flexible body. There's a lot of nuance to hypermobility and hypermobility syndrome. So AJ is going to teach us a lot about hypermobility and how can we be the best teacher we can be to those bendy students. And let's be real, you are going to have a bendy student in your class at some point in your life. And if you are a bendy person yourself, I think you will also going to benefit from this workshop, even if you're not a teacher. The workshop is happening Saturday, November 8th from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time in person in Long Beach, but this workshop will also be Zoomed live streamed, so you can join from any time zones. It'll also be recorded, so if you want to watch the recording, you can register and you'll receive the recording link after the workshop. I hope you can make it. AJ is super generous and you will get 2 hours of Yoga Alliance approved continuing education hours for this workshop if you attend. And the workshop is sliding scale from $10 to $60. So it's a very affordable and accessible workshop. So I hope you can make it. If you have any questions, you can always message me and let me know. I'll put the link to register for the workshop on the show notes so you can go check it out if you're interested. Let's get started on today's podcast interview. Today, I am sharing the conversation I had with Mado. And Mado is somebody I have been looking up to for many years. Since I was a new teacher, I've been listening to her podcast called Yoga Teachers Resource Podcast. And this was one of the first podcasts I started listening to. It was geared more towards business side of yoga from somebody who actually understands yoga teachers. And Mado herself is a yoga teacher, have gone through a journey of being a full-time teacher and building her own business. And I feel like she really understands what it's like to be a yoga teacher. And you'll understand why as you listen to this conversation. But she has been such a helpful and strong voice in the yoga world, in my opinion, that being able to have this conversation one-on-one with her was really amazing. As a full-time yoga teacher, I know I need to look at myself as a business owner, and I know that is my weak point. I'm not a business person. I don't have any educational background in business, how to run a yoga business. So I have always learned a lot from her and resources that she shares, and I'm actually really excited to continue working with her and learning from her. So Mado is someone whose work has deeply influenced many yoga teachers around the world, including myself. And she's been teaching yoga since 2005 and is a host of the Yoga Teacher Resource Podcast, where she shares practical advice and heartfelt insights to help yoga teachers create meaningful and sustainable career. And in this episode, we talk about what it's like to be a full-time yoga teacher, what it's like to set goals and boundaries, finding your niche, and also understanding business as part of your dharma. So I really appreciate Mado's approach. She's very honest and practical. She's full of wisdom, and I'm excited to share this conversation with all of you. So I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Mado, to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And I was just saying before I recorded that I've been a dedicated listener of your podcast for many years. And I've been part of your, I think, flight school before, where you go through like the business side of yoga. And I just really appreciate all the work you do for yoga teachers. So I'm very excited that I get to actually have you as a guest today. So maybe start with telling the listener, where are you currently located? Where are you logging in from? And also, where are you originally from?
I'm logging in from Asheville, North Carolina. It is a very gray, rainy day in October as we're recording this, and it's supposed to rain all week long. Mm-hmm. But I grew up in Hawaii. I was born in Japan, so I was born in East Asia, lived there till I was 3. My parents are from Europe, so I then spent a couple of years in the Netherlands and France, and then I grew up in Hawaii. So I moved to the Asheville area when I was a teenager.
Okay. See, I knew from hearing your interviews or you being interviewed that there was Hawaii and Japan in your background. I'm half Japanese, and I actually grew up in Japan till I was 12. So do you speak Japanese?
Well, not much. Mm-hmm. But I did study some Japanese in college, and my stepmother's Japanese. Okay. So I definitely, I'm familiar with the language, and I could brush up on it and improve. Yeah. But I was never fluent because I left when I was 3, and my parents spoke English and Dutch and French to me. Mm-hmm. Okay. So a 3-year-old who's exposed to 4 languages at once is a little bit delayed in all of them. So I wouldn't say that I was ever fluent in Japanese. Uh-huh. But I do love the language, and I have spent a good number of years studying it. Oh my gosh, I have a core memory of studying kanji. And it's just so overwhelming.
Reading and writing can be challenging, Japanese. I feel like speaking and listening, I'm fluent, but my reading and writing, I just actually came back from going to Japan, and it just, my level was already elementary level when I left Japan, but now I think I'm back to maybe first or second or third grader level. But yeah, it's a challenging language, I think, to learn, especially reading and writing.
Yeah, I have a similar relationship with French that I can speak pretty well and I can understand quite well, but reading and writing, I'm so terrible. It's like this. It's a classic experience of a third culture kid, right? Where we grow up in a culture that's different from our parents. Our parents are giving us some hints of their culture, but we're not fully immersed in that culture.
Yeah. What is it that your parents did that you grew up in so many different part of the world and also with different cultural exposure?
That's a really good question. So originally they were free spirits, hippies. They just loved traveling, and they found their way to Japan because they heard it was a good place to make money, and they just fell in love with it. And so my dad ended up becoming a professor of Japanese history, and my mom ended up becoming an acupuncturist. She went to acupuncture school in Japan in Japanese.
Wow.
And that was her career. Yeah.
And what made them move out of Japan when you were 3?
Well, the story that I got is after having kids, that they found that having children who looked significantly different from everybody else, they were afraid it was going to impact our experience, basically our psychological health.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing is, like, once you've done that, once you've planted that seed, it's kind of off and running, because it was even the same in Hawaii, honestly, even though, yes, I spoke the language in Hawaii, but also I looked so visibly different from everybody, from 90% of the people around me, that, it still had a huge impact on my life. So I haven't had like a ton of conversations with my dad recently. My mom is not with us anymore, but I am. It's so curious and interesting because he had another family and they are half Japanese and they grew up in Iowa. So like he had 2 sets of kids kind of with the same experience.
Yeah, interesting. And I feel like I can totally relate. Like growing up in Japan, I don't look Japanese, even though I'm half. Like nobody would usually ever guess that I'm half Japanese or even half Asian. Yeah. So it was a challenge growing up in especially public school in Japan. I think it's changing now, I hope, in Japan a little bit more. There are a lot more diversity in Japan, maybe especially in the bigger cities, but definitely that was a challenge for sure. Like never really feeling like I fit in, even though I felt like that was the only country I knew at the time, like only language I knew how to speak, but never really completely feeling like I was part of them. So definitely it does, there's a lot of confusion growing up as a third culture kid or mixed, but that's why I wanted to ask, because I have heard you say Japan and Hawaii before, and I wanted to hear a little bit about your background. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And when did yoga come into your life, and how did you decide to pursue becoming a teacher?
Well, I started practicing martial arts first when I was in college, and I also was introduced to yoga in college, and I enjoyed both of those disciplines, and they felt like they really balanced each other out nicely. The martial arts was like pretty intense, and the yoga felt sort of nurturing in comparison. And when I became a mother, I no longer had time to pursue both. Mm-hmm. So yoga at that time felt like more like what I needed. So that's what I pursued.
And was it in Asheville? Is that kind of where you started practicing yoga?
Great question. So I did move here as a teenager, and I did take my first yoga class here. Mm-hmm. But I went to college in Iowa, which is where my dad and his family live. Mm-hmm. And so I really started practicing martial arts and yoga in a small town in Iowa. Mm-hmm. And when I moved back here is when I became a mother and sort of made that choice to focus on yoga instead of martial arts. Yeah, I was here.
And what kind of yoga was it that you really got into it in the beginning? And what made you decide to take a teacher training and wanting to become a teacher?
Yeah, I really liked all types of yoga that I tried. I was not particularly focused on the style. I was more interested in if I connected with the teacher. So I took Iyengar yoga, I took Kundalini yoga, I took Vinyasa yoga. After I did my first teacher training, which was in Vinyasa yoga, I started to get really into Anusara yoga. I liked it because it was kind of felt like a merging of Vinyasa and Iyengar, where there was this focus on alignment and body awareness and precision, but wasn't quite as rigid as Iyengar. So I was into that for a long time until 2012, which was like a crazy year for me. I lost my mom, and the system of Anusara like went through this implosion. And at that point, I really stepped away from it, and I was really questioning everything in my life. I started to study more anatomy, more of an anatomical approach. The experience of being sort of in a school of yoga and sort of taking on a perspective, somebody else's perspective, and then having that really kind of turn out to be not the healthiest environment, it made me deeply skeptical of everything, and it made me want to question and find my own answers to everything. And so that's when I really started studying anatomy and saying, okay, I want to understand the body well enough to question everything I've been taught about yoga and kind of come to my own conclusions about it.
Definitely. And I think I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you took a lot of Jill Miller's trainings and workshop. Is that when you kind of started really getting into anatomy?
Yeah, I took a lot of Jill Miller's trainings, and I also took anatomy at the community college near my house. So I just took a college level anatomy class as well. And that was really fascinating because very little of it was musculoskeletal anatomy, but it was also good to understand the broader context that musculoskeletal anatomy lives in. Because as yoga teachers, we are sort of hyperfixated on muscle anatomy, but I think it can make us a little bit reductive, and we just sort of see the body from a musculoskeletal perspective. So I think it's always useful, and this was sort of this period of my life, what would we call them, the twins, was really about trying to see the body and see movement from multiple different angles to get a little bit more of a 3D perspective on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm curious, after you finished your teacher training, like your first 200 hours, did you start teaching right away? And did you have another job before doing the teacher training? Were you kind of doing both, or did you kind of go straight into trying to become a full-time teacher? What was your like a transition in teaching career like?
Yeah, great question. In the beginning, the first teacher training I took, I actually quit because I got pregnant. When I had my daughter, I re-enrolled in that teacher training when she was about 2. So at that time, I was a stay-at-home mom and a yoga teacher part-time. I actually started teaching before my training was done because I just had an opportunity fall into my lap, and I was like, why not? Previously, and also at the same time, I started doing some freelance web design. And so I've had my toes dipped into the world of web development throughout the entire time, even if it was just building my own websites and maintaining my own websites. So let's say that really, for the most part, I had 3 different roles at the same time. I was yoga teacher, freelance web designer, and stay-at-home mom all at once.
That's a lot. Do you remember how often or how many classes you were teaching at the time when you were trying to also do the web design and be a mom?
Yeah, I was usually teaching about like 6 classes a week, I would say.
Yeah. And how were you able to find balance in that? And I'm curious to know, like, how did your teaching career or teaching start to shift? Because I know you know, right now, I see you right now. So, like, I know you do a lot of mentorship and a lot of online work and helping yoga teachers now. So maybe I'm curious to kind of see the flow of, like, as a beginning new yoga teacher, so, like, how did you become where you are now as your yoga business grew?
Yeah. Well, I really loved teaching at the YMCA. That's where I first started. And I had just a lot of students and a lot of energy and excitement about my classes. So it felt very rewarding. At the same time, when I was teaching in a studio, I would only have like 2 students. So I would go to the YMCA and I'd have like 60 students in my class. And then I would go to the studio and I'd have like 2 students. So I kind of had both of those experiences at the same time. And as I was looking around at other people, I was like, okay, how might my career develop? The option was basically teacher trainings. And I did start teaching in some teacher trainings as well. But around the same time that my mom died, she actually died with $400 in her bank account. And when I learned that, it really floored me because, remember, she was an acupuncturist. So she kind of was in a similar field. It was like a helping field.
Yeah.
And I just had this moment of being like, I don't want that to be me. I want to have more security than what my mom had.
Yeah.
And so I started to, in addition to studying anatomy, in addition to studying, I started doing CrossFit. There was Pilates, like all different things to expand my perspective. I also started studying business and saying, okay, how can I approach this a little bit differently than what I'm seeing other people do? Because this is not seeming like a slam dunk. This is seeming like I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it, but like almost like an MLM where the studios are pumping out these yoga teachers. They're making money doing teacher trainings, but then there isn't enough opportunity for all the teachers. So I kind of saw this writing on the wall. I was like, I think that this is not going to be sustainable. And I am curious if this could become more sustainable. Like, how do I make this sustainable?
Yeah. Which is like, I think, questions a lot of yoga teachers have, right? Like me being teaching for almost 10 years and all the yoga teachers I get to interview or the teachers I get to interact with. I think we go through this stage of teach so many classes a week and then realize this is not sustainable. And how can I make this, if I want to continue doing this for 10, 20, 30 years from now, how can I continue to do the work or work in the yoga field and make a career out of it, or make it so that it's sustainable, that it's not draining. And I feel like for me, when I started listening to your podcast when I was a newer yoga teacher, like you were one of the first one who was actually starting to talk more about the business side of being a yoga teacher. And how you said you took some business classes. Like was it geared towards yoga teachers, or was it some kind of like, again, maybe at a community college yoga business school? So what kind of business classes did you take, and how were you able to kind of translate that into yoga world?
Yeah, well, I tried to find lots of different perspectives. So yes, I took some classes at the community college. I talked to mentors through the small business mentorship, nonprofits. I hired a coach. I took an online course. I took a few online courses. So really, like, I think this is sort of my approach to life is let me get lots of different opinions and let me see where they overlap and see where they diverge.
And is this the time when I remember hearing you talk about you interviewed 100 yoga teachers? Is this the time that you started this project of interviewing 100 yoga teachers?
Yeah. So one of the online courses I took was with Rachel Cook, who her old branding was the Yogipreneur. Now I think her brand is the CEO Collective, but she used to be called the Yogipreneur. And it was in her course that she challenged us to have, actually, I think this was even post Yogipreneur. Like she had expanded her branding to include other industries as well. So she encouraged us, whatever our target market was, whoever our customers were, that we interview 100 people. And at that time, I had already been teaching over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I had already been teaching in teacher trainings. And I really loved the energy of teacher trainings. I loved the level of engagement from people who were already teaching or were planning to teach. They were just so excited to go very deep. And that felt rewarding to me. So that's who I wanted to focus on. And so that's who I reached out to and started these conversations. And I loved them so much. It's just sort of like your podcast too, right? You get to talk to all these yoga teachers, and it's so fun to have that shared vision and shared passion that most people misunderstand from the outside. And so it just felt really energizing and uplifting to have these conversations. And that is what inspired me to start the podcast, because I was like, I want to keep going. I want to keep having more of these conversations. And I don't want them to be just limited to us. I want people to be able to listen in so that we can all feel less alone. We can all feel more understood. And we can all recognize, wow, there's a lot of people who understand what I'm going through, even if they might not be in my life.
Yeah. What did you find in that interview? Like a big picture of like, what are some patterns that you saw in all the teachers you interviewed? And I think that's something I'm also trying to take notes on, and with all these amazing teachers I get to interview on this podcast, is like, what are some patterns? Like, what is something everybody's saying, and what is something that like common thread throughout? So I'm curious, what did you find as your common thread?
There's a lot of common threads. I'd say the first is just how much we care. Yoga teachers care a lot. They're very sincere, and they really want to help.
Yeah.
And they really believe in yoga. There's a lot of imposter syndrome and self-doubt related to that. Mm-hmm. They care so much, and they really believe in yoga, but somehow there's a disconnect between their belief in yoga and their belief in their own ability to transmit that. And that issue of sustainability and being able to do what they love without burning out, and especially if they want to make it all or part of their income, how to make it's never adequately compensated. The amount of energy that yoga teachers put into their work is never fully remunerated. It just isn't, because they care so much. It's always about more than the money for them. And I believe even if you look at the highest paid yoga teacher out there, well, maybe Bikram is the exception here, but like, you know, there's like, other than the narcissist, the dark triad, who happens to like use yoga as their container, 99% of yoga teachers, even the most successful of them, are so hardworking. The ones that are successful are so hardworking. They are giving so much that, like, I just cannot imagine it being adequately compensated, because it's just not valued in the greater capitalist culture that we live in.
Yeah, I feel very seen and heard. I can, like you having that conversation with 100 yoga teachers, I feel like you really, really got to hear many teachers' stories, and that's such a big takeaway that you were able to learn from that experience. And how did that 100 interviews kind of create a path for you to kind of go towards? Because I know you said before you even started doing this business, classes, you realized like this conventional way of being a yoga teacher, just teaching group classes, just wasn't gonna be a sustainable way for you. You needed to find another alternative, slightly different way that not many teachers were doing at the time. So like, how did this interviews and this inquiry and learning from so many yoga teachers, how did this kind of open up the new path, or maybe a different path for you to move forward as a yoga teacher?
Yeah, well, at first I was just learning for myself, right? I was just like, I just need to open my mind, first of all, to the possibility that maybe business isn't boring and slimy, and maybe it's actually just neutral, and I can pick and choose elements from it that are going to be useful for me. But after having these conversations, I was like, this is such a universal experience. And at this point, I have been studying this for long enough that I actually feel like I have something to share now with other yoga teachers. Like, that was a realization that I had by having these conversations, is that they were like, 5 or 6 years behind me in that sort of that stew of, I know I need to do something different, but I'm not sure what it is yet.
Yeah. Is that when you created your online program? Like I think Flight School was the name?
Well, I created the podcast.
Okay.
And then the next thing I created was an online course called Workshops That Wow, because I had always really loved teaching workshops. Again, it was similar to the teacher training thing of just like gathering together the most interested people in the room and kind of going deeper than the drop-in class format.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time and energy studying and experimenting and honing my strategy for developing workshops. And so that was the first thing I did, was create an online course that sort of reverse engineered everything that I had figured out over the past decade and organized it and laid it out in a process that somebody else could follow. That was the first one I did. And then Flight School was the second one, where it was like way more ambitious, way bigger. Yeah. That was quite an intense project. And what kind of happened over the course of actually both of those is I fell a little bit into, workaholism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I was working so hard on them that I kind of lost myself a little bit. So that was really interesting. And so my process since then has really been about learning to pull back and really find what is essential for me to do and how can I not overdo. Even as I'm trying to offer the same amount of value, less is more.
And I feel like maybe, well, can you tell the listener, and also, I don't know for myself either, what year was it that you started your podcast?
2018.
Okay. And I feel like at the time, it probably wasn't as popular and big and saturated as it is now. What made you want to start a podcast?
Well, part of the course that I was taking was encouragement to create content regularly, that you have to find some way of connecting with people.
Yeah.
And so I had tried blogging, and I just found that it didn't mesh well with my perfectionism. I just spent way too much time on each blog. And the idea of making videos was super daunting on the other end of the spectrum. So podcasting felt like the middle of the road where I could go deep and really explore topics in depth. But there's no way to be a perfectionist about a podcast. You have to let them be what they are.
Yeah.
And so it really was a good medium for me. I didn't know it was going to be, but it just had that hint from those conversations. I was like, I love having these conversations. Let me see if I can do this podcast. Yet you're right, there weren't as many other yoga podcasts out there. And there was immediately excitement about my podcast. Surprisingly, like I think within the first week I had like 200 downloads, which might not seem like a lot, but for a brand new podcast, I was like, what? 200 downloads? And that fueled me. I was excited. So and it was just growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
Around the peak, I think I was getting like 30,000 downloads a month.
Wow.
I think I'm down to like half of that now. Yeah.
And were you, as a fellow podcaster, I'm curious, because a lot of the podcasting is we put a lot of time and effort recording and editing and putting it out there. And unless you have a sponsor or unless you have, I don't know, affiliate code or something, there's, especially right away, there isn't like a direct payback right away, or maybe never, who knows, but there's a way that you can kind of start to promote your own work or your own offerings on there, and that can be a way. So were you able to kind of promote your own, the workshop, that wow, as well as your flight school? So is that kind of how you felt like it wasn't just you giving hours and hours on this project, but kind of not receiving the return that you were wishing for? Like, how did you feel like it was a good balance or good addition to your business?
Well, at first, it was just exciting to be getting such a positive response. And I also felt like I was really lucky. I got to interview these amazing people and sort of like have one-on-one sessions with them, kind of ask whatever questions I had. So I wasn't thinking of it so much as like trying to get a return on it in the beginning. And yeah, over time, I did start to talk about different things that I was offering, and I just met people and networked and shared about my own offerings, and that is what's kept me going. However, I will say that, there came a time where I pulled back from releasing an episode every week to releasing one every other week. And in the past few years, I've even taken breaks of like a few months where I didn't record any episodes, because I was like, look, this is not something where if I don't do it, I don't get paid. There's not that correlation. It's first and foremost, it's like a service and a way of being connected with others. And yes, I do need to make money in some way in order to keep doing it, because there are costs associated with it. Yeah. But I've never thought of it as a money-generating activity. It's always been, it's had to be rewarding in its own right to make it, fun and sustainable because, this is 2018. So we're talking about like is that just 7 years that I've been doing it? Yeah. It's 7 years. And there were points in time where I was like, I need to figure out how to make this fun again because it's starting to feel like a chore. And you can do chores when you're getting paid a certain amount per hour for them, but it's hard to convince yourself to do chores when there's like no intrinsic or extrinsic reward.
Yeah. And from the outsider, the listener point of view, like I know you just shared a little while ago that you fell into this workaholic, working too much on your businesses, your offerings and all of that. And you said, I saw from the listener's point of view, like you did pull back a little bit of like not releasing every week, having take breaks, and also even like, because I know you have a lot of amazing offerings, but a lot of offerings lately you do collaboration and partnership with other amazing teachers. And I think maybe how you run your online programs and membership also has, like you say, shifted a little bit. How did you hitting that wall of workaholic, you like, oh my god, that just doing so much and maybe kind of losing yourself, I think you said that, and then kind of pulling back and trying to figure out this new way to show up in a way that is more balanced and sustainable for you. So what was that transition or journey like for you?
Well, my core value right now around my work is fun and joy. And so that's why I've been partnering with people, is the dynamic of personalities interplaying with each other when it's a good fit is fun. So that's really what the filter that I'm filtering everything through in my business is this going to be fun? Is this going to feel joyful? And that's what feels sustainable for me right now at this point in my life.
Yeah. And can you share with us what does your work look like in terms of, are you teaching certain number of group classes or online classes, or you're running, well, podcasting is one of them, and maybe your online program, the membership program that you have. So maybe tell the listeners, what are all the little things you do to kind of make you have this yoga career that you have right now?
Yeah. Well, I don't teach any regular yoga classes, group classes. I get invited to teach at teacher trainings. So I'll teach workshops and teacher trainings when I'm invited, and it's fun and joyful. I will work with people one-on-one. And I have the podcast, and I have a membership for yoga teachers. So I am connected to yoga teachers every single week, talking about the things that matter to yoga teachers and supporting them. The membership includes systems, rituals, and routines for big picture thinking, and also that core value of fun and joy and connection. So we meet once a week for a weekly planning ritual. We meet every month for a group coaching experience that usually has a theme. So we just cycle through different themes, different areas of the business that tend to get neglected. And so there is a opportunity and a container to check in with all the different sides of your teaching business and make sure that they're healthy. Then quarterly, we do planning and goal setting. And once a year, we actually do a deep dive into a full year plan for the following year. Inside the Impact Club, maybe my favorite part at this point is that each member has the opportunity to book a 20-minute check-in with me each month. So I get to cultivate one-on-one relationships with everybody in that program. Now, sometimes people go 2 months without booking, or sometimes they get a discount if they want to book a longer session. So sometimes they'll do more sessions with me. There is kind of that intent to know everybody in the membership. So nobody's like, it's not a number, it's a little bit more sustainable than only doing one-on-one, because I get to see them each week if they show up for the weekly planning session, but also I get to see them one-on-one and kind of hear the sides of their business that they might not be okay sharing in a group, and kind of really brainstorm and problem solve with them on the specifics that they are worried about and that they are needing help with.
Yeah. Well, I just joined that program recently.
Yay!
I'm excited, except that the meeting is really early for the West Coast. It's 6
It's true.
a.m.
Yeah.
I can always watch the recording, but I can try to make it to the bigger meetings, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome.
Because you recently shared this on your podcast when you had a, like, I think online coaching call on your podcast. And I didn't know you had that program. I feel like after the flight school, I wasn't sure what else you had going. So I'm very excited to hear that you have that going, and I'm excited to be part of it.
That's awesome. And if I get more people from the West Coast, I can definitely do an additional session. I could do like an East Coast-based session and a West Coast-based session. I mean, I don't need a ton of people. If I had like 3 people from the West Coast that wanted, I do tend to pull more from the East Coast. That's just sort of, the natural thing of your location. But let's stay in touch, and we'll see if we can find some more West Coasters who might want to do a little bit of a later check-in.
Yeah, that'll be great. So I think for me, when I was a newer yoga teacher, starting listening to your podcast and following your work, you were one of the first more like business side of yoga, a person who was kind of educating teachers on the business side of yoga in a way that really spoke to me, like in a way that didn't feel like too salesy, or it felt very in alignment with our value, I think, as a yoga teacher. The point that you realize that, okay, just teaching group classes not going to cut it as a long sustainable way. And I think a lot of the listeners on this podcast, full-time yoga teachers, are, I think, in that point where a lot of them are just teaching group classes and starting to realize, I can't keep doing this for a long time. What else can I do? What kind of online program can I create? Or how other ways can I make income so I can be more sustainable as a yoga teacher? And it seems like you were able to make a pretty big shift. Like you said, you don't really teach a in-person regular group classes, but you have kind of built this beautiful business that you're still working with yoga teachers and you're still teaching teachers, but you kind of have your own business now, and you don't have to be reliant on studios or gyms. So what kind of advice would you give for yoga teachers who are in that stage of their teaching where they feel like they're stuck in just group classes?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is don't be in a rush to teach full-time. There's no magic wand, and you're not a better teacher because you teach full-time or part-time. So I think it would be better to transition slowly into teaching yoga full-time and have a plan and feel like you really understand the strategy that you're following as a full-time yoga teacher versus just quitting your job and jumping in headfirst. Because the stress of not having a strategy and a plan can really derail you. I think people often make bad choices when they're stressed. And a little bit of stress is fine, right? That's what keeps us alive and active and engaged. But if you find that you are starting to act in a way that you don't recognize, that you are behaving in a way that is out of alignment, or you can't sleep at night because you're under so much stress, like maybe you leapt a little too early. And it's like, can you find a way where instead of going from, I started out 30-30-30, right? Like 30-60, and then can you get to 50-50? Is there something that you can do that could be more incremental in building towards being full-time, so that you can watch how your offerings are landing and respond and expand as things are working, instead of like, I'm just going to jump into the deep end of the pool. I haven't had any swimming lessons. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah, I like that. I think such a great advice, because I hear a lot of teachers wanting to become full-time right away and jump into it, and they don't have to. And also, you don't ever have to be a full-time yoga teacher, because it's not, I don't think it has to be. It doesn't make you a better teacher just because you're a full-time teacher or better yoga practitioner.
And it's not for everyone. It's not a good fit for everyone. Some people don't like being self-employed. Some people want to have a boss and want to have structure that somebody else creates and they just follow. So if that's you, then probably being a full-time yoga teacher is not going to be sustainable, because there needs to be more thought put into it than just saying yes to every opportunity that's presented to you. eventually you're going to have to learn where to say no and how saying no can open more doors than always just saying yes and just doing more and more and more. It's just, that's just not sustainable. And with the way that studios and gyms pay, you only have so much energy available. You only have so many hours that you can be, quote unquote, on stage. I know we're not acting when we teach, but we are on stage. Our nervous system knows that we're being observed by, and we're being put in a position of authority. And so that is on stage, and it's not sustainable to, you can't do it for an unlimited amount of time, basically. You have to like step away. You have to restore. You have to fill your own cup. And you also have to do all of this offstage work as well, just to make the onstage stuff possible.
Yeah. I think I'm definitely navigating the space, what you just said, of like learning to say no so that I'm just not overcrowding my schedule. Like you said, sometimes saying no creates yes to another opportunity or another possible path. So that resonates with me a lot. And I'm curious, since you've been doing this work and coaching and helping yoga teachers for quite some time now, since before the pandemic, during, and now, have you seen any shift or changes in challenges that yoga teachers have, or maybe like the possible career path has expanded or has changed for yoga teachers? So what are some like shifting changes over time that you have seen in your work?
Well, the pay at yoga studios continues to go down. So everything that I saw 10 years ago is only more true now.
So more like you're saying that the need for yoga teachers to rely less on studio job and kind of create something of their own has become more important now than before.
Yeah.
Yeah. With working with teachers, I know you do a lot of one-on-one and group coaching. What kind of, I guess, characteristic or kind of teacher have you noticed can like excel or like really shift a needle in their business or in their yoga teaching career versus some people tend to get more stuck, or some people who their needle may not move as much? What are some like differences in qualities or characteristics that you saw?
So the biggest difference is, how do you respond to anxiety? I think everybody's anxious. That's, if we weren't anxious, we wouldn't be attracted to yoga. We wouldn't have found our way into yoga. Everybody's anxious, but some people freeze when they're anxious and other people get into motion. And the people that I see being more successful are the ones whose anxiety fuels them to try things, to experiment. People who have enough of a handle on their perfectionist tendencies, that they can see themselves growing through experience versus holding themselves back until some mystical day in the future when they're ready. So it's really about experimentation, trying things, seeing what the results are, and then trying the next thing based on that experience.
I love that. Okay. I'm going to have to sit and think about that for a little bit.
Which would you say you are?
I'm definitely an experimenter. I'm not a perfectionist at all. I'll put things out there before it's perfect and with a lot of mistakes in it already. Like, that's my tendency. But I tend to sometimes, like, if I try something and it doesn't work out well, it didn't get the result that I wanted, I have harder time like trying it again. Like, I feel like, oh, that didn't work, I failed. Whereas like you said, I could make some changes, like use that as almost like a research, like try to make tweaks and try it again. And I also lack sometimes this big picture thinking. That's why I wanted to join your program, because that big picture thinking, some people say like CEO thinking, kind of having a broader perspective and being able to plan bigger projects and see my business from a year ahead. It doesn't have to be exactly planned to the T's, but because sometimes I get caught up in just teaching classes or day-to-day stuff, that I have a hard time making time to have that big picture thinking for my business. So that's why I'm really excited I feel like your program will be very helpful for that.
And that's exactly why I created it, because your experience is really common. We need both. We need to be in motion. We need to experiment and try things. And I think what we need is structures and systems to hold us accountable for zooming out sometimes, because it's just it's not a natural thing. It's not something that, at least for me, it wasn't something that just happened intuitively. It was something that I had to seek out, learn about, and then figure out how to build it into my life. Because, the first prerequisite is being a doer, is someone who does and tries and puts things out there. Yeah. And then once you have that in place, then you're ready for the big picture thinking. But if you try to start with the big picture thinking and don't have the muscle of trying and working and just, experimenting, then you're going to go to that first place of anxiety of like, oh, I got to get this right. I got to get this big picture right before I can take action. So I'd much rather work with somebody like you who is going to try things, even if they're not perfect. And then I can help you zoom out and look at the big picture, because ultimately the impetus to get in motion has to be in place first. The other part is much more teachable.
Okay. I'm excited for a one-on-one.
Yeah, me too.
So I want to be respectful of your time, but I think one of the last questions I want to ask is that for me, somebody who is, I do have my own yoga business or like my online courses or teachings or offerings, but I still do work for studios and gyms, but I'm in a place where I want to grow my own and rely less on outside source of income. I want to be able to kind of generate my own income more. And then for me, seeing somebody like you, who you said like you're almost seems like 100% of your work, unless when you become a guest teacher for other teacher training, but you kind of have built this yoga business in a way that you are completely like sustainable on your own without being reliant on other businesses or other business owners or studios and gyms. So that's something that's super inspiring for me, because that's where I want to aspire towards. So what are some lessons that you have learned along the way of this journey of kind of slowly walking away from studio jobs and kind of building your own? What are some lessons you have learned along the way in this journey that you want to share with the listeners?
Okay. A business like this relies on customers and relationships with customers. And a lot of times we can be very seduced by the concept of a new customer, but the relationships you have with prior customers are like your gold. They are much, much more valuable than somebody who is new to your world. So it's important to have systems in place that will introduce you to new people on a regular basis, but your time and attention is even better spent on nurturing the relationships with people who've already demonstrated that they value what you're offering. I think that's the biggest nugget that I would. Don't forget about your current students. Don't take them for granted. Figure out how to stay connected with them and circle back around to people if they were in your world previously, and who knows why they dropped out of your world. Even if they don't come back into your world, a lot of times those can be a beautiful source for referrals for another new client. So I think just to stay really grateful for every single person who has ever paid you to teach yoga. And to remember the value of the people who've supported you in the past.
Yeah, that's such a valuable lesson. So thank you for that teaching. But I'm curious, when you said that, since you don't teach group classes or public classes, how are you in your business finding exposure or new students? Obviously, you said you're cultivating relationship with already existing students and the previous students, but in your business model, how are you being exposed to new teach students?
Yeah, so being on your podcast is one way, hopefully. Tomorrow I'm doing a webinar for Offering Tree. So strategic partnerships is my favorite. So I'm trying to regularly connect with other people who might have a similar audience and just offer a sample of my personality, my perspective, the types of things that I share. And when that happens, when I do that, there's always some people who want to check out my podcast, for example. It's the Yoga Teacher Resource, and you can find it at teachingyoga.net. So that's my favorite, honestly. There's also a lot of word of mouth that happens, and I'm super grateful for that because it's something that's not really, like, I'm not driving that word of mouth. And every time I hear about it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for believing in the work I'm doing enough to share it with your friends. But yeah, the big thing that I personally take action on is to connect with other people because that's just what's fun for me. Other people really enjoy making social media posts and like find people through social media. Teaching public classes at a place like, for example, when I used to teach at the Y, that was how I built my community in the first place, is that there were always people dropping into the Y. And if they resonated with my teaching, if they liked my classes, they would tell me after class and I would collect email addresses. I know that you can't necessarily do that at every studio, but I was fortunate to be able to do that at the Y. And gosh, I'm sure there's just like 100 other ways, but those are the ones that come to the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I love that strategic collaboration and partnering with people. I think is definitely helpful for sure. And especially if you're not teaching, and then if you're teaching group classes and you're in front of a big group of people every week, I think, like you said, cultivating relationship that way and collecting email addresses if it's possible to do that. Great. Well, thank you so much, Mado. I feel like I got so much out of this conversation, and definitely, like I said, I've been a listener of your podcast for a long time, and you have been offering so much amazing resources for yoga teachers for so many years. So thank you so much for all that you do, and I'm just so excited that I got to have you on my podcast, which is so exciting. And please tell the listener, is there how they can find you, how they can reach out to you if they want to, and also if there's anything I missed or any questions that I didn't get to ask you that you still want to share, feel free to share that too.
I already mentioned my podcast. You can just search Yoga Teacher Resource on your favorite podcast player. You can also find it at teachingyoga.net/podcast. I am on Instagram. I don't post a ton on Instagram, but I do respond to private messages, and I do sometimes get a little bit more inspired to post. I'm at yoga.teacher.resource on Instagram. I think that's my favorite ways to stay connected. And thank you, Reika. This was so fun. And I'm so excited to have you inside the Impact Club and to get to know your business more and support you more.
Yes, I'm very excited too. Well, thank you so much. I'll make sure to link all of that on the show notes so people can click easily and find you. Thank you so much for your time, and I really look forward to working with you more in the future.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. It was such a pleasure to have Mado on, and the fact that I get to interview her, since I've been listening to her podcast for many, many years, it was kind of nice to be able to have her on and for her to share her journey and her beautiful wisdom on this podcast, because she does have a lot to offer. Like I said, she have an amazing online membership offering mentorship for yoga teachers, as well as she is facilitating a thing called Map Your Year, and where she's going to help us go through kind of like planning our 2026 as a yoga business owner. So if you're interested in that, I believe today is the last day of the early bird for her offering. If you want to sign up, I will be there and utilizing Mado's offering to help me kind of map my 2026 and think about where do I want to put my effort in, how do I want my life to look like in 2026. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link on the show notes as well. And that is it from me today. If you can please like or star or review or subscribe this podcast on whatever platform, that would be super helpful. And most importantly, just share this podcast with somebody you know who you think might benefit or enjoy these kind of content. That would mean a lot to me. Otherwise, follow me on Instagram. My handle is at Reika Yoga, ReikaYoga, or you can always message me on my website if you're not a social media person. My website is www.reikayoga.com. And I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, I'll speak to you next week, and have a great day.